All right, guys, what's going on? It's a little late here, but I said I'd get on here and do a video. Try to keep this short. The last video that I did is actually a live stream, and that was, I think that was about 6 days ago now. So Bitcoin was trading a little bit lower than where we are right now. Yeah, it definitely was because I was talking about how the price action was typical in what you would see with a move that was going to swipe a little bit lower. So I think I said 99 times out of 100, this kind of price action in Bitcoin ends up lower. And we ended up moving higher and trading back above the cutoff point that I talked about for that idea being invalid, at least in the short term, which was 62.5. So just to recap the last stream, a couple things that we talked about, opportunities in BTC and alts. The trading opportunity for BTC was if we trade back above 62.5, we'd probably see a pretty quick momentum long back through what ended up being the last area of balance before we made the highs around 66.4, 66, whatever it was. These highs right here, that area of balance right here. So accepting back within that composite, trading back to the high of that composite, and yeah, the most bullish scenario is obviously us continuing to just hold prior levels in market structure. But a really bullish turnaround is obviously being able to mark up considerably higher and hold sort of the top side of structures rather than just like trading through them and then continuing to kind of just drift back down. So for me, for Bitcoin to be really confident is for us to trade back above 65. I talked about this in stream. I talked about this on Twitter after. I mentioned it on Twitter. I think you're just going to still have a lot of uncertainty in this general area. So the market's kind of split whether or not, we've had a change in structure, something has drastically changed with this break above 65. If that remained bid, futures path determined, that would have been great. Continue to mark straight up, awesome. But that isn't the case. Instead, we're trading back around what is basically fair value for this entire structure. So we're not necessarily in, a range with clean highs and clean lows. We're technically trending lower, but we're not really trending, right? I mean, high time frame, the point is like both sides can be right? Someone will look at this and say, yeah, we've been trending down because you have a series of lower highs and lower lows overall. Someone else might say, nah, we're trading in a really clean range. The smartest person would actually say that we're actually just stuck in a nearly perfect channel. So if you put like a regression channel on this, snap this bad boy on, you see that it's very clean, right? But we're trading right around 63K, which is not for nothing. Like that is fair value for this entire structure at this point. So consider fair value basically the most agreed upon price, right? Area where buyers and sellers can, are pretty much evened out, right? That's kind of equilibrium for this entire structure. So that being said, taking positions at this level, it's kind of like saying, hey, I know better than every single other person that's currently in the market right now in the last few months. And I believe that major change is going to occur right here. Rather than saying, okay, 63K is the most agreed upon price, I'm going to, until there's major changes that are clear across the board, like some obvious flow or the market is just marking up through prior levels, back up at the highs. Until that happens, like I'm going to trade the wrong prices, right? So when we're extending away from 63, my anticipation is that we just continue to chop around, and if we're trading much lower, I'll look to buy that in anticipation of mean reversion. If we mark up, I look to sell that. Excuse me, just to be clear, this is just a hypothetical conversation someone might have if they're looking at 63K as fair value, and ideally you don't want to take trades at that level, sort of diddle in the middle, as some people say, and you instead want to look to trade prices that get overly extended from that, anticipating that they might sort of correct back, right, to resume the behavior that has been most consistent to this point. And there definitely is a pattern of behavior, right? I mean, the market is finding supply each time slightly lower, finding demand each time slightly lower as well. Obviously, more recently, there's a little bit of a change, but moves like this and moves like this are, you could make a case for them being this being a function of a lack of liquidity, and this being a little bit firmer. Yeah, there is a higher low, right, from a sort of the market printed here, the market printed there. Clearly, this is a higher low right here, but on a closing basis, just consider that on the high time frames, this market is closing lower and lower, or rather had been, right, because clearly now we're higher. Either way, there's not a whole, like, this market is really boring right now. I don't want to be pessimistic or anything, because I'm everyone says the same thing, right? Bitcoin believer long term, but you only have so much time in the day you could devote to where you point your attention, right? That's it. Like, if you're a trader who trades intraday, intra-week, you can't afford to just stare at a chart all day that's not doing anything, or that isn't giving you, the kind of setups that you might have in your playbook. That's what people on CT will do, though. They'll just stare at the charts, talk about the charts, for weeks, and nothing is really happening, or at least there's really no cause to continue to post the same stuff. So with BTC, I think 65K, that might be a level where, all right, so now there's less sort of uncertainty around whether or not things are changing, and you'll see maybe a little bit more confidence come back in the market if, because now the market it's a little bit of a disagreement whether or not, structure is changing. Oh, and we have, maybe a double top right here, right? A lower high in the making on the lower time frames right here as well. So, can't be that confident about that yet, right? And again, just sort of hypothetical conversations. But so 65, I think, maybe changes that. Short term, I mean, stock market's moving up. Bitcoin isn't doing anything. MicroStrategy's moving up. Bitcoin isn't really doing anything. You have some things that I think are maybe people want to call them bottom signals, but at least the market has to do a good job of showing that it can weather those things first. So you have Coinbase that's starting to trade at a pretty consistent discount to Binance, which is something that can usually persist for a little while before the market actually marks down. So I think this is usually a pretty bad omen. But the government was just cleared, the United States government was just cleared to sell, I think, that $69,000 worth of Bitcoin. So we'll see. I mean, if that hits the tape and the market isn't able to remain bid, like, I think it could end up anywhere, right? If that starts hitting the tape and we see that the market hasn't done anything but move sideways, then okay, maybe there's a better case to be made for this thing. 60K being the last opportunity, right? I think if 60K goes, that is troublesome, right? Because again, this is one area of the market where maybe some people are, or I'd say this is one area of the market where there's a pretty split field. There are people that are under the impression that there's the beginning of a major change taking place. And I mean, like, the beginning of a major change that's going to lead to something happening in the next month or two where prices are much higher, right? So this is the beginnings of that. And even though the market has marked down a little bit now, I think that because of that split in terms of the sentiment, that positioning might be a little bit stickier. So people that might have bought above 64 or at 65, et cetera, on this move, they might feel like they're still going to get saved, right? So instead of sort of knee-jerk selling like we've seen the entire time, that is still remaining a little firm. I think if you break back below 60, then you'll see that side of the market come back into the market in the form of, dumping positions. So you break 60, I think you just reinforce the pattern that's occurred to this point where we end up just moving back below, I was going to say back below 50s again, but back into the 50s again, and possibly back towards the lows of this structure. So that's again, futures path determined. If we break 60, I think there's a strong case to be made for that. So right now, Coinbase is trading at a consistent discount. We're sort of ping-ponging in terms of open interest. Like, this market is just sort of trading within, like, I think 100K to 90K contracts. If we aggregate against the most significant exchanges for price discovery, you can see how the market is just ping-ponging between two relatively clear zones, right? The lower 90s, upper 90s seems to be sort of a cutoff point and an exhaustion point. So cutoff in terms of positioning being saturated at the highs, and an exhaustion point in terms of squeezing out that positioning and then seeing some kind of mean reversion, whether it's on the short side or on the long side. But I do think I think we're still at a point where, like, we're tapped in terms of the capital that's coming in, right? This market needs a big spark. Now, money is happy to jam back into the same place over and over again. Obviously, meme coins. We'll get into that in a second, but there's just not that extra wave of capital that we need to send this thing through. So, how does that end up happening? Well, I mean, I think if confidence slowly comes back by native participants, or in the form of native participants rather, just slightly bidding more and more now that maybe things are changing. Maybe a Trump presidency will change things. Further rate cuts, easing overall. The market loves to talk about things that are, maybe most people outside this market might disagree on. But in terms of like the immediate effect of policy changes and, Fed decisions, yada, 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 there's a lot more certainty by CT about how things work rather than anyone else outside this market. But anyway, I digress. Then maybe, we start to see this continue to have some kind of positive drift. And then, we start looking like something, back here, or, another area where we had this sort of positive drift and we remained sort of float and bid is going back to 2019, right? Just a general drift up, like price action sucked intraday, lower time frames. But if you zoomed out, right, you saw how the change happened gradually and then all at once, right? So, that might happen by crypto natives, meaning, every one of us continue to remain confident, buying a little bit here, a little bit there, and then suddenly, this thing has floated its way up to 70K and then starts to get away. Then maybe, this market is that much more exciting and we start to see fresh capital come in, and BlackRock's talking about it all the time. And the point is, like, someone's got to make the first move, right? And it doesn't look like anyone wants to, right? It's a good chance. There's a good possibility that the BlackRock ETF has done a good job at suppressing volatility, if anything, right? With that basis trade that's available now, or more readily available. Keeping this pinned because boomers and TradFi types don't like volatility in their portfolio. Either way, so in terms of BTC, just like local setups, because I think that's all that's really worth talking about right now. So diddle in the middle, right? Big picture, we're at like basically fair value. So right at the highest volume node for this entire structure going back to March. Locally, right? So we had this sort of pivot, this nice little change in market structure. So that is significant, but overall, anyone can make a case for this continuing to make lower highs, right? And then locally now making a lower high, and we sort of have this bearish retest. One sec, let me get this lined up. We have this bearish retest of that composite right after trading through it and trading to the other side pretty quickly. So underside retest of that structure, it's a matter of which structure do you prioritize now. Do you look at this as, a lower high overall and liquidity was grabbed up here and everyone got excited, and now this is like the further breakdown and opportunity to sell again? Or do you look at this and you prioritize this structure, right? The fact that we did make locally a higher low and a higher high is not, I don't think you could be too confident in either direction. I think you could be more confident actually if you didn't have the Coinbase discount, honestly. It just reminds me of a bad omen. When it stays wide like this, I don't think it's Binance buying. I think it's more likely that someone is offloading on Coinbase. Either way, I saw some conversations about whether or not MicroStrategy is a leading indicator for BTC. I don't think that's the case. They've been disconnected plenty of times in the past, and MicroStrategy ended up catching up to BTC instead of BTC sort of marking up with MicroStrategy. As far as like low time frame setups, because again, I don't think there's a whole lot of meat on the bone. The monthly chart looks, doesn't look as bad as the daily and the weekly. Now, some people might look at this and say, well, what do you mean? How does that look bad? I mean, we're all looking at the same market, right? Like, it doesn't look great. Like, there's no real reason to get overly excited about this market right now. Like, if we're just being honest with ourselves. Like, yes, money does jam back into meme coins. I think that's going to get pretty tired, though, at some point. Notice I say at some point because people are happy to jam back in. But if we see, for example, I'll get into PopCat in a second. Let me stay on track for BTC. So as far as like local setups go, I'm in drawing mode still. As far as local setups go, we're trading within yesterday's value right now. So obviously we closed out that session not too long ago. Trading within yesterday's value currently. So market is still basically in balance. Yesterday was a somewhat balanced day. I mean, if you just look at the candlestick, it wouldn't necessarily look as balanced as maybe just looking at a TPO. You have some excess at the high. Now, mind you, we did have an attempt to break back within. Let me do something real quick. We had an attempt to break back within prior day value area, the prior day value area. And this is, just to be clear, this is Monday. This is yesterday. Just closed out that session. This is your weekly VWAP. So from a local trend standpoint, bears are in control. I would want to see that we continue to base out within this structure, right? I mean, again, what do we prioritize here? Do we prioritize that we are having sort of an underside retest of this structure, right? Or do we prioritize that overall this has retested 60, 61 and has held? I don't think there's a whole lot right now. I think that, lower time frame trade setups, the ones I would go with are breaks from balance, right? So 65 and above, I think, okay, you could have a deeper conversation. But locally, I think that if we end up, let's say, 62, 61.9, 61.8, this region, so yesterday's low. If we swipe below that, right, and we see that the market is accepted below 61, 61.9, sort of yesterday's low, whatever it was, you got some poor lows down there, 61.871 to be specific. If we see the market remain accepted under that, even for a brief period of time, like we're not right back above it right away. We don't have any kind of spread blowout. If you're looking at a footprint, you see a bunch of money jam in into the low, and you get a bunch of zero prints on the ask, right? That instead of the market chasing it down, you just had like a little pop, a little blowout of spreads. If we don't see that at 61.8, like let's say we just continue to trade lower, we remain rejected at yesterday's value area low, I could see this being a little 3-day continuation down. In that case, end up retesting sort of the thick of this composite down here, so right around 60,800. And I don't think you want to see it obviously go below that, right? Again, because that 60,000 level I think is quite important right now. So we're, so far right now we're trading within value. Yesterday's structure. For a move back up, right, or just opportunity on the other side of things, I think that you obviously have to start trading back within a little bit more within the meat of yesterday's range. So that'd be something like trading back above 62.5 region, which coincided with those lows, and then ends up being back above today's value. And then maybe you have a move that ends up trading back to weekly VWAP, and then I would say probably the POC of yesterday as like a pit stop. I don't know if what you're seeing in alts even more than BTC is like these bearish retests. They're stopping at prior POCs. They're stopping at prior composite POCs, just where like the thick of liquidity is, and then continuing to return lower. Another thing to point out is that Binance sellers back. So we saw a good amount of pushing around in the order book, or rather in the offer, I should say, not pushing around, but presence. So every time this has happened, and they've flexed this hard, the market has continued to move down. And you look down here, like right as soon as we marked up, you had this big increase in open interest into the highs. Again, open interest is kind of trading, ping-ponging between like 10K of open interest before things revert. So the market marked up, and then you saw that before that happened, you saw that the bid at, so if you look at depth between 0 to 5% and then 5 to 10%, 0 to 5% is going to be this red right here. That darker red, that's whenever you have 5 to 10%. So just the skew in terms of the bid ask ratio, right? So how much is in the offer versus how much is in the bid, right? And ideally, when things are bullish, you want to see that Depth all the way down to 10% is really stacked, right? So you're stacked close spread, you're stacked further spread. And the opposite would be true as well. Like if you're moving up, you want to see that, you're not walking into, a ton of reinforcements and a bunch of stickiness above. So we ended up turning right there. And this has kind of worked the entire way down. Like there's been a pretty big Binance bully. And, some people say it's, the Binance trading desk, but I don't know. Who knows, right? There's a lot of bullshit that goes around on CT. So either way, Bitcoin, there's nothing really exciting about it that jumps off the page right here. So local opportunities below 61.8, that 60,008 level, below 60,000, I think we're kind of fucked. Back above. So if we end up trading, now that we've had this sort of transition through that composite, if we end up trading again, back through, let's say we're back above yesterday's highs, right? Back above yesterday's value, back above yesterday's highs. Then I think you could just kind of write it off that this is going to trade back to the high right there, right around, excuse me, let me get rid of this real quick. So yesterday's highs are right around 63.2. I think if you get a break above that level, you have a short-term setup that squeezes back up to that high right around 64.5 region. If you end up doing that, though, and I think it's worth pointing that out, right? Because that is where you had a seller come in. If we end up doing that, if we trade back above yesterday's highs, back above, the meat of yesterday's value, then I could see this, being more confident about this, trying to test out that 66K level again. But it's very much like if this, then that. There's no oomph in the market right now. Actually, this, the level I would look to first would be right around 65, right? That 65 is a pretty important level from, I think, a psychological standpoint, and you do have this gap of singles there. So we cruise through that. I would expect some resistance right there. That might be where you get some break-even sellers, right, who might have bought the highs, and then we'll see. But if we end up trading back above yesterday's highs and we're doing work and, we're able to mark up to 64.6, I would say this probably extends to that point. So something like this probably leads to 65 retest, which could just put in another lower high, right, compared to this level. Either way, nothing tremendously exciting to talk about. More importantly, I think, is alts. So when it comes to alts, we had filtered them down quite a bit based on strong September closes. Now, the strong September close category, the strong September close filter was basically, and WIF is a great example. SU is obviously a fantastic example. SU is already up considerably in the month of October. Another good example was not Solana, but SEI. So strong candles, right? Breaking market structure, big green candle, big change, what looks like a big change. And then the idea was to buy, we filtered that down. So we got a little watch list based on that close. So FTM was a good one. Fetch was a good one. ETH not good, but it's just always going to be a list either way. What was the other one? Pepe was good, but you didn't end up closing through prior month's highs. So there's a few that stand out a little bit more than others, right? Like just focus on WIF, just focus on SEI. SU is to me, like SU being this extended to highs, like you could say focus on it because it fits the same criteria, but we're at the most significant contextual level on the chart. Like at this point, I'm not buying into that level. So SEI, for example. So the thing about these is, yes, for a lot of them, they're so far working out, right? So we filtered it down first. So for example, it started off as a lot and then it turned into a little based on the monthly close. And then the ones that we do have ended up, again, they are working out so far, meaning the idea was September closes, you buy the dip that occurs in the first week of October. So that, that's kind of timely. We had a first week dip so far. But the threshold for these was half a weekly ATR, which is around 10% pullback. Some of these pulled back a little deeper. So if we look at, say, from its monthly close to the point it pulled back, it's 17%, right? So that's 17%. That's it's an 8-cent move. If we look at the weekly ATR, so one sec. So weekly ATR is 0.11. So it's a little bit over, it's a little bit over a half a weekly ATR. 0.11, 0.8, it's 75% of the way there. So a little bit deeper, but one of the things we mentioned with certain setups like this is for some of them, you want to buy this retest, right? So for example, if you look at this structure on the higher time frame and look sort of what's happened that's inspired change. So it broke outside of a really clean range, right? So the retest to buy sort of reflexively, you have the idea in mind of, okay, I don't want to buy something that's having a major excursion, right, beyond norms. So that's why I use something like half a weekly ATR, assuming that the trend is going to remain strong. You're not going to have really deep pullbacks, but for certain setups like this, I'm still just going to buy this retest either way. So let's say, it pulls back a little bit deeper than you anticipate. Maybe you're stopped out of your original trade idea because your window was too tight. And then we retest this level and you just enter back into the trade. Like, you have to be willing to get back into something. Or you could have just been patient, waited for this level. Like, it's completely up to you. You might have missed a trade though if it didn't end up pulling all the way back, right? So there's obviously there's no perfect entry method, and sometimes things are going to work, sometimes they're not going to work. Sometimes you'll have conflicting signals or conflicting criteria. But for situations like this, I think you just had to be confident that, or you had to be willing to take the risk, right? That a change like this meant that change occurred. And if we're back under this structure, okay, that's it. Right? You lose money, right? Because that's what trading implies. You're going to lose money at certain points. The thing that I want to say, though, is like there's not a whole lot of giddy up around this level right now. Okay, so if the market if Bitcoin's not going to continue to mark up, so if Bitcoin is going to retest 60, for example, or push down to 60,800, just to talk about levels I just mentioned, do these continue to hold up? I don't know. I'm already seeing, so this has already been filtered down considerably. So the outperformers outside of memes it's few and far between, right? So, new L1s, and then you have like Tau, the AI narrative. But other than that, I mean, there's not a whole lot. Memes are where all the attention is, okay? And if there's a lot of memes that are breaking down or not showing a tremendous signs of strength, everything else is starting to break down, then I'm just a little less confident in the follow through of that October trade idea. But we'll see. I mean, maybe as we get closer to the election and the market gathers around the idea that Trump presidency is more likely, maybe we see some of these alts really start to catch a second wind. But some of them are just spending a lot of time, right? For changes in market structure, some of them are spending a lot of time around the levels that signified change, right? So Pepe is a good example, right? Pepe had a strong September close, but nothing that engulfed the prior month, so no major breakout of structure. This was not as clean, but it's retesting this prior high. You could use sort of a diagonal on this to show how this is kind of just climbing up. But this lower high in the making, like we've had this happen before. And if there's no new money coming into this market, like, are these going to continue to just mark up? Is money going to come out of everything else that's just dormant and continue to mark memes up? We'll see. Popcat has got a ton of attention. Popcat, I mean, I look at a structure like this and you start to see that Popcat is actually a good amount of buying now that's coming in. Excuse me, it's very very light. It's a good amount of buying that's coming in now on futures. And I think you're going to start to see inventory sold into this. So if you look at open interest, obviously all the way up into this, but if you see funding starting to spike up here, just be careful. I mean, at some point this thing is going to come back down pretty hard. And I think that the point of mentioning Popcat, because I'm not going to be long Popcat up here, is I think you could get sort of another spike up towards this high. I don't think they're going to make it easy on anyone who's trying to call the top and short it. But I think if let's say Popcat is like temporarily topped out, or when this temporarily tops out, you're going to probably suck a good amount of life out of the market. Because I don't know if WIF is exciting everyone, right? WIF is another one that had a really strong move for September, satisfied that first week of October criteria, had a big pullback, had a big bounce. locally, I mean, not a whole lot is worth getting worried about. I mean, do you have this series of higher highs and higher lows being made now? That's, something that's clean and being respected. Yeah, but I mean, this kind of rejection up here, it's not what you want to see in a continuation structure. I mean, usually maybe this has another pop up, right? But usually this kind of spike down, it's usually followed by chop, right? So, and again, we're moving back up to a very significant level, sort of just under that $3 level. So I don't know. I mean, I was more confident in the October setup a couple days ago, right? But it just feels like a lot of money just jammed back into memes, and I don't know how much money there is to push the needle beyond what we're seeing, like with these, these brief pumps. Sorry, I'm stuck in drawing mode. Something else. Let's see. I want to go over. Like, everyone's getting so excited for really not a whole lot. Tau kind of looks like whiff. So if you look at Tau, if you look at whiff, both had decent rejections at these highs, are holding though locally. So when I say locally, I just mean local market structure. But it's not often that you see that moves like this are preceded by a ton of follow through. So maybe we chop up a little bit more, but again, I think a lot of these are hinging around BTC continuing up in the near future. Because again, I mean, a good amount of these have had some nice positioning accumulate to this point. And it's not like, so absolute levels, again, of open interest, not as concerning as, the velocity of open interest over a short period of time, right? So a lot of these have been gradually up because the trend has been gradually up. And yeah, you're having more money come back into the market. But yeah, I mean, these are back into high time frame, big levels, right? So, I mean, can we overcome this supply? Is someone going to be buying through this level? With BTC kind of just, again, over a $50 discount right now, looking kind of just, not that exciting. And stocks are at all-time highs basically. And MicroStrategy is moving up. I think MicroStrategy probably tops out around here pretty soon. I don't see why this would continue to extend up. Tech is up though today, so Hang Seng Index down again. So anyway, I want to finish this off. I just wanted to hop on here with a couple thoughts. But just the prevailing theme is that crypto is just, I don't know. I don't think it has that spark right now. I get it. If you're a small portfolio, you want to trade meme coins, that's fine. But I think there's a lot of bullshit there. I think they try to make it seem like it's, very open and against what had been previously just VC bullshit. I don't think it is. Like, they're still seeing the same kind of, let's say, coordinated behavior in meme coins. It's just a different form than we saw with the VC bullshit, high FDV garbage that people have been talking about for the last year and has now just been downtrending for equally as long. I just think it's a different grift, and I don't know if this market looks like it has anything right now to be totally excited about. So I think I'll run a poll in Telegram and get everyone's opinion on something, but I think we're gonna open up the conversations a little bit more to cover traditional markets, maybe a little bit heavier. But I want to see what everyone's feedback is, because I know that I have a pretty crypto heavy following. To be fair, like, talking about this shit every day is boring as fuck. That's why I'm not doing it. So I'm not on Twitter every day talking about this. I mean, when nothing's happening, like the VIX spiked, right? So, and I promise I'll wrap this up in a second. So we saw the VIX spike recently, and I don't even think Cryptovol did anything. Like, no, I mean, Cryptovol is daily chart. There's nothing going on right now, right? No big bets. ES down overnight. Crude oil, keep an eye on this one. The thing about everything right now, it sounds ridiculous, is there is still that looming threat of a headline, right? Middle East headline. So it's tough to be really confident right now with a ton of reasons to not be confident. See, did I miss saying anything? I'll hop on in the morning and check out the questions on this video. What else was there? I don't think there's anything. The overarching theme is that I don't know if I'm as confident in October resolving the way I guess I thought it would, only up until the last couple of days. I think that a lot of alts are showing the way. I guess that's the best way to put it. And, you know, what better way to do that than actually just let's look at like top 100. Okay. Top 100. Let's blow this one up. Okay, so just like going across the board, I mean, do any of these look more zoomed in? Tron looks great, right? Tron always looks good. I mean, OKB, OKX coin. I wouldn't bet against exchange coins. That's one thing. This kind of looks like it's curling up. I mean, but is there any of these right now that look, as I say that, I land on a couple, right? So Aptos though, but we've seen like that's up in the last 24 hours, like meme coins down, Aptos up. But a lot of other alts are just starting to break back down within structure. So there definitely isn't a rising tide, like we've been saying that forever now. You know, things just look like shit. Outside of memes, right? And if you look at memes, a bit of a different story. Some of them are falling back within structure. Does this bonk look like it's about to rip up? I don't know. I'd be a lot more confident if it's able to break outside of this little multi-day composite right here. 2181. FTM though, this is one that I was asking about Sonic the other day for a reason, or yesterday. This looks good, right? So there's a few things that look good. There's a lot of things that look like shit, and Bitcoin isn't really doing anything. So there you have it. I'm going to put a question in the chat, so make sure that you participate, and yeah, hopefully things will get exciting soon. All I know is listen, this is going to come to an end very soon because the election week is probably going to be pretty nuts. So look forward to that. Election day is going to be fucking insane. Anyway, have a good night, guys.